Welcome to our Vita Salon. This is an online collaborative call with an incredible group of richly intelligent, passionate intimacy, love, and relationship coaches from around the world. And we get together once a month to have really immersive, deep dives on topics that we're passionate about, that we guide and lead our clients through, and that are interesting to us, that we want to go deeper together. And so in this discussion, we will be covering the topic about should I stay or should I go, which is about relationship choice points. So you will be hearing from a variety of voices and deep shares on this really important topic. So I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Harmony Scott, and I am a love, life, and intimacy coach. And I am joined by the lovely and intelligent Dasha Barsakova, and she will be bringing forth this topic and telling us a bit more about what we're going to be discussing today in our Vita Salon. So enjoy.
Thank you, Harmony. Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Dasha, and I am a vision doula. So I come from the background of sex, love, and relationship coaching, but I actually integrated into my work and I help healers, change makers, and thought leaders have a bigger impact in the world by connecting and tapping into their superhuman abilities. And it's really incredible that we can bring all of this together. And this is why this topic was really interesting to me, because it's something that we deal with all the time. And I know personally, I mind F myself so much around, should I do this? Should I do that? Should I stay? Should I go? And it's such a energy leak and it's very disempowering. So this topic was really dear to me in terms of, for myself, empowering me, but also empowering my clients, empowering them around making these crazy choices around their mission in the world, their purpose, their impact, their movement, right? And this impacts us in our intimacy as well. Sometimes when we feel unaligned in commitments that we have said yes to, relationships, partnerships, even friendships, especially as you're growing, as you're expanding, as you're changing, sometimes you outgrow different connections. So I'm really excited to bring all of these questions and also all of these different points of views together on this topic today.
Thank you so much, Dasha. What a beautiful introduction and such an important topic. And I know because of the response of our group that this is going to be a juicy discussion. So let's dive in. So the first question that we're going to be holding and exploring is, what are the signs or core issues of a relationship, a commitment, like Dasha was explaining, these different ways that we can be at these choice points? What are the core signs or issues of a relationship or commitment that needs to be ended or changed? So please speak from your own personal experience or a client experience that you have permission to share. And let's explore that. How do we know when we're at that choice point? How do we know that there's a big decision that needs to be made? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Shaun. And I think that one of the most important questions that someone needs to ask themselves in the context of a relationship is, am I able to authentically be who I am? And that this is the core of everything that really allows you to be in a relationship that is healthy. And for me, I guess, story behind this is I was in a 26-year-long marriage that kept me in a place where I wasn't able to be who I was. And it really wasn't until that marriage ended that I was able to step in to being, I guess, the divine being that I am. And that for those people who are kind of wondering, is this for me? It's I know for me, it was asking myself the question, well, number one, am I happy? And I really wasn't. I was not able to do the things that my heart wanted me to do. And am I feeling, satisfied, satiated, from a number of perspectives? And and for me then, the answer became very clear that I'm really not being me. And in order for me to move forward and live my life in the way that was going to be the most benefit to me and to those around me, I needed to make a hard choice to not be there.
Thank you so much, Shaun. And Fanny.
Hi, everybody. Happy to be here. I'm Fanny Le Boulanger. I'm French. And so I just wanted to first thank you, Shaun, because you shared something really important that we need to put a really big emphasis on. What I also like to talk about with my coaches or with myself is the role of consent. Because if at any point there is a lack of consent in your relationship, and there's some part of, we have a responsibility about educating ourselves as well to what is consent and what is not, because there's no half consent, there's no gray consent. But when you've done that work, suddenly you might, or you might not, which is awesome, look at what you were experiencing from a different angle and a different point of view. And so this consent piece is so huge. And that goes with looking at the physical and mental impact on the relationship. That is also kind of a red alarm. So if there is a physical or like physical, like abuse or anything, but just even mental impact, that for me is one of a big sign that things need to be changed or looked at.
Thank you so much for bringing that up, both of you. What I'm hearing is just not only this internal piece that Shaun was talking about, where we are really noticing, am I really happy? Am I really being fulfilled? Am I really being expressed in this relationship? But Fanny, what you're bringing forward is this idea of consent. Am I in agreement to what I'm living? Is this something I'm actually actively choosing, or is there something that I'm in almost like a one down position where it's happening to me and I'm having to like react and respond in a way that's detrimental to my health? And those are very, very powerful discernment pieces that I know as coaches, sometimes we have to hold that for our client. And if we don't have that kind of support, those can be really difficult things to hold for ourselves. So I really want to thank you for bringing that forward. And Dasha, please share.
Okay. Thank you both for sharing that and bringing that depth. For what I want to bring in is what I notice with my clients is dissatisfaction. So there's this uneasiness and dissatisfaction. And then there is the desire. There is desire for something else, but then there is this pause and block, and it's this feeling of unworthiness, or like, oh, I can't really have that, or like, if I have that, then I'm selfish, or I'm gonna like hurt the other person, or hurt whatever. Because normally when there's a commitment, it's between two people, right? Because if no one was involved, you just be like, okay, great. But it's either like a commitment of a relationship, partnership, or even like a commitment with a landlord. One of my clients signed a lease and hated the place, and then had this whole internal war of like not hurting the landlord when it was all about her, right? So I like to ask a question. If like you could have anything you wanted and like you wouldn't hurt anyone else and the other person wasn't involved, what would you choose? What would you create? And most of the time there is that answer. And then the other thing, yeah, it's working on the worthiness and deservingness to actually allow yourself to have that, and then figure out how you are going to resolve the other thing. Like, and I think the other important part is actually doing like a check and seeing if your action is actually going to impact the other person. Because sometimes, yes, like if you're leaving a marriage, there's kids, but sometimes it's all in your head actually, and it's not actually going to impact them. They don't even care, and maybe you making that choice is actually for the highest good of everyone. So yeah, thank you.
I loved how you pulled those different pieces together about that inner discernment and the permission giving of even asking ourselves that question. Thank you so much for that.
All right. Hello, everyone. Yeah, my name is Michaela Rose Soble. I'm a polyamorous dating and relationship coach. So I help individuals, couples, dynamic relationship constellations, and communities create and sustain relationships from the sovereignty of their heart's truth. So what's been coming up for me around this, should I say or should I go, something to ask and something that I like to bring awareness to of my clients, because I tend to get a lot of couples that come to me in this exact question. And I always like to boil it down to, is the pain that you're experiencing, is the challenges that you're experiencing, the conflict, we can't come to an agreement about this. We have mismatched libidos. What do we do? One of us wants monogamy and the other one wants polyamory. What do we do? Right? All these kind of, or other difficult questions, challenges, past traumas that people are dealing with. I like to bring awareness to, is this pain that you're facing right now a difficult season of your relationship life that's calling you deeper into doing the work? And are you both available to do that, like wholeheartedly? Or is this pain a fundamental misalignment? And I had to learn this like really harshly with one of my first couple clients because they came to me and they were wanting to open up and we were doing all this work around this, and I didn't take the time at first to ask them, why are you coming to coaching? What are you using coaching for? How have you used coaching or therapy for this problem in the past? Because what I didn't know is that I learned later in the feedback form, right? And after coaching was done, that they had been to like 4 or 5 other coaches and therapists and done this same runaround. But the truth of it was, when I finally started doing some one-on-one sessions with the woman in the relationship, was that she really just wasn't in it. And she was using this whole opening up as like an excuse because she knew he wouldn't be open to it, and was using it as a way to like make the thing fall apart without really having to own her feelings. And within a couple sessions, all of a sudden it was like, I want a divorce. I was like, oh, I see that now, right? But really taking that time to get curious. Is this pain that you're going through something that you are both really here to learn? Your souls have come here to have this experience and work through it, and you're both really here for it? Or is one person really here for it and the other one's like, nah, I'm playing the victim story over and over again, and like it's not really gonna happen? And then can you be really honest with each other about what it is you would need to feel like you're both showing up for that level of work that's needed to get through this? And if that's not the case, then you have a fundamental misalignment, you know? And then there's some cases where the pain really is so great that sometimes people do need to just release, right? Because that pain has just been too much, right? And at the same time, with deeper, trauma healing, all this kind of stuff, it is possible a lot of the time to work through it. So that's the question. That's the kind of, yeah, the seesaw that I kind of like to explore, is like, is this pain yours to work through, or is it something else that's fundamentally misaligned and it's time to choose something new?
Michaela Rose, thank you so much for bringing that forward. I love that question that you're holding. And I know all of us in our trajectory of being coaches and supporting couples, we've had that moment where we didn't ask the fundamental question, or even of ourselves, right? And when you described the question that you ask, are both people really available to do the work that it's going to take to traverse this challenge, or, to come to some kind of do we have the capacity to show up? And what it really reminds me of, also, I did a full training with Terry Real, like 3 levels of training with his relational life therapy. And he has this powerful question that reminds me of your question, which is, it's a little bit different, but is what I'm receiving in this relationship worth grieving or doing the work of what I'm not receiving? Right. So like that fundamental question, like, is what I'm giving up worth the cost? Right. And, or is the love worth the heartbreak? Or is it worth going to therapy? Is it worth going to coaching? Is it worth, am I really available to do the work to make this dynamic work? And I know for myself as a mature woman, I've definitely been through this cycle several times in my life in different capacities, long-term relationships, business. And what I notice is doing that inner work about my values, really getting clear, like, what are my values in life? And those can shift over time, right? So we kind of have to stay fresh with what are our values, what is our deep focus in life, what's really important to me, and then go back and look at the relationship and say, am I engaging with my values in a way that I feel like I'm in integrity with myself? Because if that relationship is going against my deep fundamental values, then there's a problem. We start getting into self-abandonment. And anytime, and was so painful in my marriage that broke up in the last 2 years, was that I got to a place where I realized, because I loved this person so deeply, that I was in that space of starting to really self-abandon and do too much emotional labor to do the work for him because I wanted it to work so badly. And that was very, very painful to acknowledge in myself, that because of all my skill, because of my huge heart and capacity, and because of the love I had for this individual, that I was showing up way beyond and doing the work for them that they didn't have the capacity to do, even though I know that they loved me deeply and desired to, but just didn't have the capacity. And that is a really difficult moment for me. It was to hold and to get that clarity. Like, if I stay in this dynamic, I am going against my deep core values. And so I think that that's also something I wanted to bring into this beautiful conversation around, like, how do we know when a dynamic is no longer serving us? And we definitely need to engage with the decision-making process of, do I stay, do I go, and really get to that, traverse that territory.
So the next question is, what are the consequences or costs and payoff or benefits of staying in the indecision or the waiting to take action period? So what are the consequences, costs, benefits, payoffs of actually staying in the indecision? Yes, Shaun, please.
Yeah. There's, this is such a beautiful question, because I think this keeps so many people stuck, right? I can't tell you how many people I have worked with who, and myself included, who, change is scary. And being able to really be able to look at it and know, this really isn't serving me, and I need to make a change, and being able to make the change, kind of the leap of faith, like the trusting the universe, knowing that I can make a change for the greater good of both myself and the other person. And if I'm so aligned with knowing what I want, then that change is it's going to be the right thing. But the consequences of not making that change are, you're then stuck in the story, this narrative of your own creation that does not serve you. And I don't know about you, but I certainly have been in that place. And I'd say, we all have. And when we're brave enough to know that we can trust our heart, that we have an intuitive knowing of what the right next step is. And that's the thing that I love to do with my clients, is help them find their own intuitive knowing, their own embodied response to what it is that they want in their lives. And that the staying in the indecision, you're staying stuck. You're staying in the same place. And usually, when people are coming for coaching, they want to change. There's something in their life that's not working. And yeah, so thank you.
Thank you so much for speaking to that, the benefit of staying in the comfort and the safety, and then the cost is staying stuck in this narrative, in this story that you don't want to be in. Yeah, thank you. Fanny.
I have a different opinion on this. First, I agree 100%. And there is also part for me that goes around staying in the indecision can be a good thing too, because sometimes you feel the need to change and you want to cut through the mud and get out. And if you don't have the means, or if you put yourself in danger, if you don't have the resources, sometimes waiting in the indecision is a moment to build those resources, is a moment that needs, in my opinion, to be honored and not want to be escaped out of. Because we always hear the amazing stories of people who dropped everything and it worked super well. But what we also know in this waiting in the indecision part, is how we 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 build the confidence to not fall back into what we had before. And I really feel there is so much power in this space as well. And what also works there, or at least what I've seen with my clients, is how when you stay there long enough, and when I say stay there, I say stay, but in a conscious way. Like what you mentioned, Shaun, about seeing what's the story, like staying in your story. And that at that moment, it's important to notice suddenly if you're not projecting on the relationship something else that is not working elsewhere as well. It's so easy because we have human brains that are amazing at a lot of things, especially telling stories that soothe us and make us feel safe, to project on the relationship something that isn't working somewhere else. And sometimes it's not, it's 100% the relationship, but giving ourselves this space, the capacity to hold the inner mess in the most gracious way possible, is something that needs to be addressed and to be said too. The counterpart is that with that, you get more and more attuned to your basically uncomfortable comfort zone, because you basically keep, like, it's walking with like shoes that damage your feet. For example, your feet will adjust and create some, I don't have the English word for that, but like corn, like hard parts to learn how to walk with them. And so sometimes it's useful, but that's also painful. So this topic and these payoffs and benefits can actually be so nuanced for every person, a single person engaged in this part and in this dynamic, that it's so important to honor that even for one person, things can change from one month to another, from one year to another. And how, in the end, I'm gonna go blunt with a big cliche in here, but how you are able to use that to know yourself and discover what you have inside. And also acknowledge that sometimes this discovery can be messy, and sometimes the discovery can be painful, and sometimes it can be beautiful too.
Thank you so much. I love that you brought in this perspective and also that permission. I know when actually I was wanting to leave my ex, I knew it. I meditated. I had the sign. I had, like, I knew I had to do it, but I didn't have the courage. And I remember speaking to one of my girlfriends, and she said, "Hey, like, you don't have to do it right now. Like, you can take time to really feel ready, to feel really certain." And it was so beautiful that she gave me that permission. It was really healing. So thanks for bringing that perspective. Michaela.
Yeah, I really loved what you shared, Fanny, and I want to echo that, and specifically like being in the uncertainty, allowing yourself to be in that space also allows you to get really creative. You know, if there is a creative way forward, a creative solution in the relationship, and you, again, you know, the both people are really fully in to do the work, all the things, sometimes that creative solution is not always obvious. It takes a lot of time. It takes, you know what, like, I'm willing to let this go if we can't work this out, right? I'm willing to I'm willing to be in that space. And, you know, I know from personal experience, I started dating somebody 3, 4 years ago now, and he came out as asexual a year and a half into the relationship. He didn't know that about himself, but through many conversations, that became really clear. I didn't I didn't sign up for that. I didn't want to have a relationship with an asexual person. I didn't know what that would mean. It wasn't even in my awareness before that. And I went through a really hard period and for a lot of time felt and thought, oh my gosh, I can't do this. Like, I'm a very sexual person. You know, I like that in my dynamics. I don't think this can work. And I sat with that over and over and over again. And we tried this angle and this one. And there was points I really, really, really did not think that we would make it. And the clarity came through. Yeah, this relationship is not going to work. But the truth of it was that it was this relationship in the way that you're trying to have it now is not going to work. And so when we let that die and the idea of what it was supposed to look like and who we were supposed to be and how we were supposed to be relating and having intimacy. Oh my gosh, everything opened up, right? We were able to approach intimacy in a completely different way. I had to learn so much. I had to become a lot more compassionate, a lot slower, a lot more understanding. And I will say it has made me a better lover, a better partner, because I'm willing to be with somebody that has a much different style of loving and intimacy than I do, you know, and that supports me in being able to create those spaces for others, right? If it, whether it's in a professional sense or because I'm polyamorous in a, you know, loving experience kind of sense. And I'm so, so grateful for that. So sitting in the uncertainty really birthed in me some new part of me that I didn't even know existed and that I didn't know I needed, because there was a lot of healing that happened for me too, being with somebody that wasn't looking to me for sex all the time, that wasn't looking for that. And it was like, whoa, I got the opportunity to claim a more subtle, softer, slower part of myself in the process. And I would have never been able to do that had I just off the bat been like, oh, we have different needs and desires. So like, you're out, buddy, you know? And here we are, you know, 3, 4 years later, whatever. And yeah, great intimate life, great partnership. Things are going wonderfully. So yeah, that's what I'll share on that one.
Thank you so much. That's really beautiful. Thank you for bringing your story. I'm so happy to hear that about your partnership. Harmony.
I love how everyone has touched on this, like the power to stay in intuition, the power to just be in that void state. Like what I feel like this indecision state is so rich. It feels very difficult and uncomfortable to hold that space. And yet it's so rich because there's all the potentiality of all the different choices. And as Fanny was speaking to, like, this is the place where we can build that strength and that clarity, that when we are ready to take action, it's much more effective, right? Because we're like, we've sat in it, we've marinated in, and hopefully we're not in harm and like doing physical harm to ourselves. But sometimes, you know, that is the case, but we're garnering our strength, we're garnering our clarity on like in what direction am I going to go? And yet also, I think a lot of people have talked about the power of that void state of staying in that indecision. And I want to speak to the shadow side of that too, which is that we can numb ourselves. And I think a lot of us, and I've experienced this, where it's like we kind of disassociate from the cost. We disassociate from what it's really happening to us. And that can manifest in feeling numb to life, getting depressed, feeling a lack of our life force, our vitality, libido. I mean, all of us have had clients come to us going, you know, I'm feeling dead. I'm feeling really cut off from my passion and my vitality, and things can manifest with our health. there's so many costs to staying in a situation past when it is serving us. And I think it's also been spoken to, like how our brain would rather keep us alive and safe than make that hard choice. And that is just a very individual process. And this is where having a coach, having a therapist, having someone who has that meta view of you and is holding that witness space, and sometimes even a family member or a best friend, they're so close to you that they have their own agenda about what they think is best for you. So having someone who has a neutral space to hold and be able to reflect back to you what they're hearing you say, what you're expressing, because sometimes when we're in that numb state, we get into like almost like this trance or like a falling asleep to our truth. And I know that I've personally been in that state several times in my life. From childhood trauma, it was something that I did to protect myself, and a lot of us do have those patterns or are carrying those trauma patterns where to protect ourselves we kind of fall asleep so that we can stay in something that's detrimental to us, but it feels better than the unknown. And so I just really want to acknowledge how challenging that moment is. And also sometimes we'll have stories about ourselves, like I'm not worthy of more, or it's not possible for me to have more, or what would it mean if I did take this step? Would I have the finances? Would I have the family support? Would I have the belonging, right? So sometimes stepping out of a relationship or a family dynamic or even a business can really impact us on so many levels. And so I don't really have an answer here, but I just feel like the consequences and the benefits of navigating this void state, this decision state, it's so important that we have layers of support. It's so important that we don't do this alone, and yet also be resourcing ourselves, also be deeply listening and tuning into what is our inner truth, but then also having someone to hold that witness space. So I just really wanted to speak.
Thank you, Harmony. Thank you for bringing both sides and also the witness, which is, I think, an important topic to discuss as well, especially here from our perspectives. Well, I'd like to talk about, I love that everyone brought their own little bits and that there was so much celebration for the void. And so much like, wow, this is a place for growth and recuperation and preparation. Because I know people find it really uncomfortable. And sometimes because of the discomfort of the unknown, they just go to the thing that was familiar and they don't take the action because they don't want to sit in the void. They don't want to prepare. They don't want to grow the muscles to take the action. So it was beautiful to hear those perspectives. And I think for people watching, if they're in this space, maybe that will be comforting and supportive. And I also want to talk to the shadow, right? Because from the perspective of energy leaks, because if yes, you're not actually prepared to take the next step and you need to stay in the void, but sometimes you are prepared and you're so ready and you can just take that step. And you're sitting in the, should I do it? Should I not? Should I do it? Should I not? And then you're just leaking the energy. And this is something that's like conditioned in us. This is a way to make us weaker, less power, disempowered, right? So then we don't take the action. We overthink things and we overanalyze things. And that is part of a trauma response, right? It's the freeze, it's overthinking. So I think one of the costs is actually the impacts on your nervous system. I mean, having this big decision is an impact anyway, but staying in this limbo when you already know what the choice should be and then not taking it. Yeah, so I think this is where support can come in as well, right? To support your nervous system regulation and also to work through the other parts that are pulling you against, right? With Vita, we do a lot of parts work. So, and what I find with my clients is like, yes, this is the step. Yes, I'm ready. And then there's all these other parts that are like, oh no, this is danger, you're gonna die. So they're pulling you back in all directions. And then this is where the limbo in the mind effing happens, right? So I think there's a huge cost, nervous system, energy leak, like just mental state. So yeah, amazing. So happy to hear everyone's perspectives on this. And yeah, we're going to move on to our next question.
Dasha, thank you so much for bringing that in and the concept of the parts work, because it is really true that we do have all these multiple aspects of ourself that sometimes are in opposition. There might be a child part that's very much doesn't want to lose the belonging in the relationship or the work or the family relationship. And then there's another part that's like, yeah, let's get out of here. And then we're in this tug of war internally, and there's usually more than two parts. Sometimes there's 4 or 5 different voices that we do kind of have to unblend, and it takes a lot of skill. And that's where the witness again can help us unblend these different things, and we're just not in the stew pot of all these things kind of mashing together and not sure where it's coming from. So thank you so much for articulating that and how that cost to our nervous system and our energy. So the next question, super powerful, to the point. How do we get to the truth? What are the most powerful questions we ask or support our clients through to help them make that discerning choice? Or what is the inner or outer work or processes that we use to facilitate this clarity in or around ending a relationship or a commitment or choosing a different path? So I think this is where we can actually point to the practices, the pathways, the tangible things, the questions that we ask, the mindset work, the energy practices that you all practice. Fanny, can you start us off with this?
I just love that question. And I'm going to keep it short because I don't want to say everything. And I'm excited to see what everyone has in store. But what I love about this is EFT, emotional freedom technique, basically emotional acupressure, because you're coming back, you're owning how you feel, and you're also playing with accepting what you're experiencing, loving yourself and forgiving yourself anyway. And when you go through tapping scripts or just tapping through the points, suddenly you notice that the words that you use are going to change. Something is gonna step out of your unconscious, be right back in and be brought to the surface. A change of the sentence suddenly will open up a trap of, oh, I didn't know that was there. And so EFT is really something that works really well for those cases. What usually works as well, and what I'm sure we all do as Vita coaches at some point in our practice, is bring back the pleasure and bring back the sensuality using the senses. I particularly resonate, Harmony, with what you said about the numbness. That's what I do as well. In reconnecting to our senses, having a 5-minute date with a piece of chocolate, for example, just to reactivate the sensory awareness of everything. That is so important in my opinion. The question that I like, or the exercise that I like to give clients, is also the what's pulling me back and what is driving me, which basically looks like a pro and cons, but with a dynamic part in it. Something more, yeah, not a fixed thing, but just encompassing all of what's going on. And when you do that, suddenly you are able to examine what you have written and see, is it true? Is it 100% true? Could I bet €1,000,000 or dollars on it and be sure that it's still true? Or what's the part that my brain is playing in this part? So it's so important to go around these practices and these questions. In terms of questions, what I love is, do you like who you're becoming? Do you like who you are? How do you feel about the person that you are? Because this question brings back the focus on you more than the person themselves. so you don't project on them something that is going on for you. And last but not least, I truly love this question about if nobody was watching, if there was no impact on anybody, if you couldn't hurt or deceive anybody with your decision, what would you do?
That was such a good spectrum of practices. I really appreciate you bringing those forward, from the EFT tapping to these deep questions that we can ask ourselves and really get different perspectives. So thank you so much for bringing that forward. And let's see, Michaela, can you please come forward?
And yeah, so there's a number of things that comes up around this for me. Starting with the self, I'll start there, and then I'll talk about the couple, right? Some of the practices that I find really, really helpful is anything that's going to build your sense of self-esteem, anything that's going to build your sense of self. Because a lot of the time, that's the reason why it's really difficult to leave when you're in a kind of toxic or abusive situation. If you're in something that's really misaligned, is that you don't feel energetically full within yourself. You don't feel emotionally full. You don't feel like you can actually build up the tolerance to be you enough, to know you enough to say, oh, okay, this is what I don't want. And so I work with my clients a lot around energetic sovereignty. So, really rooting in and really building up the resilience to feel more of yourself in your physical body, in your emotional body, your mental bodies, your soul, right? Really allowing yourself to fill up with who you really are on a very, very core, energetic, cellular level is what's going to build up your tolerance to go, wow, okay, this is going to be uncomfortable. This is going to be difficult. The other person probably isn't going to like this, especially in a kind of like abusive or manipulative situation. And can you really lean into that, right? Can you really allow yourself to fill up with your own magic? Because then you know that that's yours. Then you know that you're not getting that from this person. It's yours to claim. It's yours to take with you as you make the next decision in your life. And part of that can also be talking with the different parts of you. We mentioned the parts, and sometimes when we're in these kind of spaces of decision making, we're listening a lot to the head, like spin around and talk. And so taking time to, talk to the heart. If the heart could speak, what would it say about this? If your deeper sensual sexual centers could speak, what would they say about this? If your deeper mind, your deeper intuition, your soul, your knowing could speak, what would it say about this? And so that's a really simple thing, right? To journal or meditate on and really get those deeper layers of clarity. So then along the lines of the actual relationship dynamic, like the couple, what can you do? So I always love to invite people to focus on two very important questions, individually and together, and try to find, is there common ground, which are, what is it that I really want? And what is it that I'm actually available for? Because those questions are very different. You may want this beautiful dream of the relationship, but you're actually really not available for that. You're going through your own thing. You just want to be solo right now, and you're like pretending that you can do this work, and you're really not in it. So I love those questions. It has helped me personally, discern that this is not for me, or yes, this is for me. It's helped my clients do the same thing. So those two questions, super important, over and over and over again throughout the course of dating, a relationship, navigating transitions. And then especially so for couples that have been together for a long time. They have something really beautiful. They're navigating this question. There's a lot of challenges, maybe a lot of traumas coming up. I invite them to put a container around it, to really give it like 3 or 6 months, where during this time, you are both intentionally doing the work, hopefully getting that witness, right? Getting the support of a coach or therapist of some kind to help you do the work, help you see, can we get through this? Can we navigate? But you make the agreement up front. Should we come to the end of this 3 to 6 months and we're both still in agreement that, this isn't going to work, or one person is like very, very certain that this is not for them, then okay, we make the transition from there. But it's a really kind way to not get people into the urgency, right? Of we have to make a decision right now, and allows them to sit in that, the void space, the uncertain space, while also taking conscious action towards getting the clarity, doing the healing work, whatever they need to make a really clear decision by the end of that time. So that's what I'll say on that. Yeah.
That was so good. I loved how you brought in those different pieces around the self-love, and really, and also a practice I love doing is really checking in and giving voice to the different power centers in our body, our deep intuitive midbrain, our heart, and our sexual center. Like, it's such a powerful practice, so revealing. I love offering that. And also just the last point, like, what am I really available for here, and what do I have the capacity for, and just really discerning that. So thank you for bringing that forward. Dasha.
Yeah, thank you, Michaela. I want to speak a little bit to my story and then a little bit to a different perspective. So for me, I was sitting with the truth, I was meditating, and it's like this knowing, it was this knowing and getting the knowing, but I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to listen. And I want to bring this perspective because sometimes you are in a relationship that is amazing. That is great. You're not in like a toxic relationship. It's amazing, but it's not the truth, and I think like our mentor Layla, if it wasn't for her, I don't know if I would listen to my truth or even feel that I have the permission to do that. And I wanted to bring this piece because it really supported me to understand that I can have everything I want, and sometimes following the truth doesn't make sense. And it's that intuition, when you follow the intuition, it doesn't make sense. And also understanding that I can, for me personally, and this is something I actually work with my clients, is not settling and not letting society tell you what is good, because from the outside, all our friends were so sad. And it's always like that when there's a conscious uncoupling. I find everyone is sad but not in the relationship. They're more sad because they like the perspective and the idea of you being together. And it's not about them. But that's the thing. It's like you're in this relationship and it's good. Why would you why fix something that is not broken, right? But then there is that truth that this is not it. And I think if I stayed in that relationship, I wouldn't have the most incredible experiences that I'm having now. But it was one of the hardest decisions of my life because it's someone I loved who loved me. And it was really beautiful and perfect, right? But there was something that wasn't. So I think, to come back to the question, how do you get to the truth? I think it's how do you actually have the courage to act on the truth? Because getting to the truth is easy. Like you just tap in and but it's like, how do you actually act on it? Yeah, how do you gather the courage? And I love what you shared, Michaela, about like growing that self-esteem, and the self-love and the self-trust, and not self-abandoning, and also doing the parts work so you don't have that inner critic coming in, or that other parts like, oh, I told you, like, you shouldn't have done this, and da 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 da. So yeah, I think that is the inner work that needs to be done, is bringing your parts so they're on your team and they're like, yes, let's go for what the truth is. Thank you.
Thank you, Dasha, for bringing forward that experience of like when things are good and yet there's still something that's not quite right, and really listening to ourselves and having that courage to stay with that process of like, what is my truth? And nobody else might understand that, right? So just having that self-love to just to honor that inner voice and stay with the process, like, so powerful and so important to name, because sometimes it's very clear I should be leaving this toxic relationship, but a lot of times things are good enough, right, from the outside. So thank you for naming that. So I'll just quickly share some of the processes that I really worked with when I was leaving. There's 2 times in my life, and I really, really needed to leave that relationship. And it was clear that I needed to do it, but I think it's been spoken over again and again. It's just when we can stay engaged with holding the question, staying with, even if it's that void state of not knowing, like having the clarity, but not knowing how to do it or what's the right timing. So it's just not falling asleep to ourselves and what's really true to us. And there's a few practices that have over time been the ones that I return to again and again. And I'm a very soulful, spiritual person, so this may not work for everyone, but there's ways you can work with it, even if you're atheist or whatever. Is really tuning into that voice of love, like, what would love do? What advice would love have for me? Like pure love. And what would love share with me about what were the next steps or how to hold myself in this process? And I relate to this as the divine beloved or the inner beloved. Like, I am in relationship to the great heart of the universe as a tantrika, as a woman who is engaged in this work. I am in deep relationship with divine love. And so when I can tune into that voice and clear aside the other voices, the mental, like, oh, but that doesn't make sense, or now is not a good time, or whatever. And one of the practices that was given to me by one of my dear teachers, Sally Kempton, was to ask the question with your dominant hand and then journal and write the answer, channeling divine love from your left hand. And it can be very difficult because it can look like chicken scratches, but something in like forming the letters with your non-dominant hand gets that critical, like logical mind out of the way and allows you to just drop into this deeper space. So that's one doorway that I've used a lot when I really need that. Another is breath work, right? I'm skilled because I've trained in breath work, but to go to a breath work session, there's so many now in yoga studios, and just go in holding that question and breathe into that question about, what is my truth? What do I need to hear? What do I need to receive? That can really be powerful. Another one is embodying, putting on some music and moving to, like, what if I stay? Like, how does that make my body feel? How does that make me express in this moment? And then what if I go? How does that feel in my body? How does that make me want to express? And just tuning into those deeper pieces, those deeper sensations and feelings, and expressing them. But really what it gets down to is staying conscious and engaged in the process, especially when it's uncomfortable, something we want to put aside, is staying with it, staying with ourselves, not leaving ourselves, and doing that deep inner work of showing up as that parent who loves us and is safe and secure to hold us in, just like a child when they're upset or having a difficult moment. We needed that parent to put us on their knee and say, it's going to be okay, and you're going to be okay, and I'm right here with you. So just not leaving ourselves and showing up for the process, even especially when it's uncomfortable, especially when we don't know what the answer is. And especially when we get to the truth and we're not quite ready to take the step, or it's a big, scary step, or we don't know how to do it. So yeah, that's what I wanted to offer on that. Okay, Shaun, yes, please come forward.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Basha and Harmony. And Michaela, I loved what you also brought forth. And to me, it's about getting to that place where you're just loving every single part of yourself and getting into that it's the liminal space, right? Of maybe that indecision that we were talking about in the question before. of not really knowing what the truth is, but being able to kind of go inward using those tools, right, that help us be as embodied as we can possibly be. Certainly breath work, certainly even using some subtle body work that really gets at the energy centers and gets even deeper, opening the channel of our pelvic floor to our heart, to our third eye, and our crown chakra, and allowing ourselves to be so filled with our own light that there is just this deep knowing of our perfection within all of the imperfections that we are. And doing that, I also have a breath work certification, and I love to use breath because breath is life. But using breath and absolutely pleasure practice, because when we are loving ourselves in all of the ways, that so allows us to then get to the deep truth of who we are. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shaun, for your beautiful, wise words. So we are towards the end of our time, and I just wanted to open it up to Dasha. Did you have any last things that you wanted to bring forward? We did have a couple other questions, or I just wanted to give you that space to kind of bring us home.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. I think something that just came up when Shaun, you were sharing, and I love like the opening of the channel from your pelvis all the way up. And I don't know, I just cannot like not share this because, Layla, our mentor, and her love for sex magic, and I think that could be a really powerful tool to tap into everything that's not, and when doing that practice and visualizing your future identity, you're sensing it with all your senses and noticing where are you in that reality, and then seeing where you're not and then following that. So I don't know, this just came through intuitively. But I just really want to thank everyone for bringing your knowledge and your skills and your stories and your vulnerability and your authenticity. I think this is such a powerful, like 1 hour plus of golden nuggets for anyone that ever feels like, should I stay or should I go? And I think one more thing I wanted to touch upon before we wrap up is we talked about really like big decisions. Yeah. But there's also times where we're like about really silly things, and I think it's important to bring these tools. Yeah. So then we are not like leaking our energy, like wasting time, overthinking, like procrastinating. I think that's one payoff that we didn't talk about is actually procrastination. So when we're like overthinking and being in this question, we're actually stopping ourselves from stepping into our greatness, stepping into our new identity, our vision, our mission, or our dreams, right? So yeah, I feel like this is something to kind of wrap up on, because this question, it brings us closer to our desires, right? And everyone who has shared today, that's the takeaways. It's like leaving this thing that didn't work to create a thing that makes us more authentic, more ourselves, or like staying in that indecision to get clarity and then taking action from that for a better relationship. So yeah, thank you.
So this concludes our beautiful salon on the topic of should I stay or should I go? I just wanted to thank everyone for coming today and for speaking to this very important process. Thank you, Dasha.
Thank you,
And
everyone.